city as the center of economic activity, a city that embraces the life of the citizens, a city that should be completely passed on the future generation. But regional imbalance, urban degeneration, disconnection of the community, abnormal climate disaster, pandemic, local selfishness, degradations, many challenges that threaten citizens. Discovering the final solutions and changing the paradigm. Now is the time to find a better city created by the citizens and experts together. The first step, with our little efforts, with our little actions, creating a sustainable city that provides happiness for citizens. Goyang City Forum.
저쪽에서 통역하지 말고.
여러분의 박수로 오늘 포럼의 문을 열겠습니다.
Please give a warm round of applause.
고맙습니다. 이렇게 아름다운 도시를 만들기 위해
It seems that we have already taken a big step towards a better future by meeting here today. And I'm sure that this is a big jump into the future. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am announcer Moon So-ri, and I'm very honored to serve as MC for the opening ceremony of the 2021 Goyang City Forum. Also, those of you who are joining us virtually, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude. We will officially commence the 2021 Goyang City Forum held here at Kintex in Goyang City under the theme of Sustainable City for Citizens' Happiness. Goyang City Forum is the representative forum of Goyang City held for the first time in 2019 to establish a sustainable urban future. A new paradigm for Goyang City is aimed at discovering policy means to overcome problems occurring in many cities around the world. In 2020, last year, the forum was cancelled, and in 2019, the first forum was held. Last year, with the spread of COVID-19, the meeting was cancelled, but our determinations and the will continue with the various citizens' participation programs. As the 2021 Goyang City Forum will be held in hybrid manner, offline and online, it will be a truly valuable time to present a sustainable city of the future to many citizens living in the city, even in the contactless era. Especially, so many participants have joined us, and I'd like to introduce you to some of them. And we have used recycling paper, and everything is paperless, and we are showing the program online, virtually. So we did a lot of work to act in a more environmental friendly way. Less than 50 people are joining here at the venue. And once again, thank you so much for joining us today, the VIPs and all guests. And also, those of you who are joining us virtually, thank you once again. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the VIPs joining us. And when I introduce their name, please welcome them with a warm round of applause. And when your names are called, please respond with a simple bow.
올리겠습니다. 오늘 고양시 이재준 시장님께서 함께하고
Goyang City Mayor Lee Jae-jun.
계속해서
Goyang City Council Lee Ki-ryong, the chairman. Chair Moon Myung-soo of National Council of Goyang City Democratic Party. Next, Vice Chair Kim Un-nam, Environment Economic Committee of the Goyang City Council. And also we have with us Chairman Moon Jae-ho of the Constructions and Transportation Committee of Goyang City Council. Now, Chairman Choi Woo-seok, the Planning and Administration Committee of Goyang City Council. Goyang City Council Kim Mi-soo, Planning and Administration Committee. Goyang City Council Jo Hyun-suk, Environment Committee. And let me introduce two people who are joining us, the host, Lee Jae-un, and also Kim Hong-jung, president of the city planning. And also all the speakers and panelists joining us. Please give a warm round of applause to welcome them. I'm very pleased to see you all today. Goyang City Forum is sponsored by the Ministry of Transportation and also Secretariat of the UNESCO Seoul Office, and also is sponsored by the National Institute for Lifelong Education and UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, OECD, FCC, GGGI, Metropolis, UCLG, and also the sister city of Goyang is sponsoring and also providing a lot of effort. Thank you very much. And many participants, including Goyang citizens, are virtually joining us. And thank you once again, Goyang citizen, for watching. Now, let's kick off officially the Goyang City Forum 2021. First order is the opening remark to be delivered by Mayor Lee Jae-jun of Goyang City. Please welcome him with warm round of applause. I'm very pleased to meet you all. I am Lee Jae-jun, Mayor of Goyang City. The first Goyang City Forum was held in 2019. The second forum is held after a year and 8 months. The Goyang City Forum and numerous international events have not been held for the past year and a half due to COVID-19 outbreak that no one could have predicted. That's what city is. No matter how well we plan and elaborately design the future, things don't always go the way we predicted. Still, we must plan for the future, no matter how many times we revise that. So, we need to plan for the future. A ship with a clear destination, see it as a challenge or episode in the course of a long voyage, even when it encounters waves. However, if a ship with an unclear destination is hit by the ripple, she loses the will to sail and drifts in the middle of the sea, even runs aground. Many cities have been busy running without destinations. Is this the right course to go? We need to reflect ourselves. The crisis of the city are giving us alarming sound. Many experts are joining us today, and we are here to discuss about the cities. And because there are so many uncertainty, we need to come up with a new milestone. Goyang City will address the three areas: urban regeneration, environment, and lifelong education, which might sound a bit little different, but these themes are connected by a common denominator, which is the future. These are the investment for the future coexistence with the future generation. Many people have joined us today, and I sincerely hope that all of you, whenever you visit Goyang City, we can write a new history, we can write a new narratives. Today, we are joined by the scholars around the world, and many people are joining virtually. What we are creating now is the history and the future. Thank you once again for joining us today. Thank you.
고맙습니다.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lee Jae-jun of Goyang City, for the opening remarks. Now, we are joined by a lot of VIPs who have shared their congratulatory messages with us. First, we would like to invite Chairman Lee Gi-lyong of the Goyang City Council for congratulatory remarks. Please welcome Chairman Lee with a big hand.
예,
Hello, good evening. Nice to meet you. I'm Lee Gi-lyong, Chairman of the Goyang City Council. Congratulations on Goyang City Forum 2021. And I would like to thank the Mayor of Goyang City, Lee Jae-jun, and everybody who have made today's forum possible. Goyang City is we need this kind of forum to make Goyang City the best and most productive city in Korea. And Goyang City Council will support the city in this journey. And I wish you the best of luck in today's forum. Thank you very much.
고맙습니다. 우리 고양
Thank you very much, Chairman Lee Ki-young of Goyang City Council for the congratulatory remarks. Now we have a special video message of congratulation. It will be delivered in English, so please listen to channel 1 for Korean translation on your receivers. Now the 8th United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon will deliver congratulatory remarks on Goyang City Forum.
Honorable Mr. Lee Jae-jun, Mayor of Goyang City, Honorable Mr. Lee Gil-yong, Chair of Goyang City Council, distinguished speakers and panelists, citizens of Goyang City, and participants and guests from all over the world. It is my great pleasure to be part of this year's Goyang City Forum. I would like to thank and congratulate all those who have worked hard to organize this 3-day forum and to welcome all of you, whether joining in person or virtually. As you know, I was very fortunate to have had a very full and productive half-century career that culminated with serving as the 8th Secretary General of the United Nations. I am proud that my tenure at the United Nations is most often defined by the Paris Climate Change Agreement and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Although it has been well documented, allow me to reiterate that I feel very strongly about climate change and the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. I believe these two areas encapsulate the issues of humanity today. Therefore, I'm proud to be continuing what I started at the United Nations and continue to help raise awareness and build political momentum for climate action and sustainable development as the President of the Assembly and Chair of the Council of the Global Green Growth Institute. GGGI's model of green growth emphasizes environmentally sustainable and socially inclusive development, and its work has a strong positive impact for the majority of the SDGs. And as I have been underscoring, these issues are too great and too urgent to be left solely to the central or federal governments of the world. That is why I welcome and applaud the efforts of cities and other local governments to also contribute to these all-important issues. I am very pleased to see Goyang City and its partners take the initiative to address critical global issues from a local perspective. With today's huge global population, urbanization trends, interconnectedness, and global movement occurring together with an increasing salience of local actions, we really do need to heed the advice to think globally but act locally. Simply put, local governments and communities can play a crucial role. So I hope the discussions during the next 3 days will yield many innovative ideas for sustainable and inclusive cities, and we can leave a better world for future generations. And the COVID pandemic has provided, if you will allow me, the perfect opportunity to start now by greening our national and local recovery efforts. If we, the local and central governments, international organizations like GGGI, private sector companies, and civil society can all work together, we will be able to proudly look back on how we, as the saying goes, did not let a good crisis go to waste, but instead turned the challenges into opportunities. Once again, I extend my warm appreciation to everyone involved, and I wish you a very safe, green, and fruitful event. Thank you. 감사합니다.
고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, and the task to create a sustainable city in Goyang is a task that we need to share among ourselves. And we also have congratulatory remarks from speakers in UNFCCC Secretariat. Program Manager Masamba Tioye will deliver congratulatory remarks through the video.
Good morning, dear participants to the second Goyang City Forum. It's a pleasure to once again participate in the Goyang City Forum. Never has the word action at all levels resonated more than in 2021. We need at national but also at subnational level actions with respect to building forward from COVID-19, action on climate change, and action to ultimately achieve the Sustainable Development Goal and build a green, healthy, prosperous, and happy planet for all people. Global warming is one of the biggest challenges ever faced by human social, political, and economic systems. Its consequences are now playing out in real time with the extreme weather we have experienced these last years. It is our existential crisis, our global emergency. The severity of its impact could increase exponentially in the absence of bold responses. The stake is the survival of humankind. Yet, despite some progress, the international community is far apart on many issues, and climate change continues to outpace us. City government can play an important role as climate actor. They are in a unique position that entitles them to conduct a broad range of possible climate actions. They can facilitate emission avoidance by fostering change in the consumption behavior of their citizens, leading to displacement of carbon-intensive products. They can enable GHG emission reduction by the citizens in their jurisdictions. They can also reduce the emission related to the infrastructures they build and operate. Cities are indeed well equipped to mobilize this potential by mainstreaming climate action into their city development action. They are expected to reinvent new ways of satisfying citizens' needs, a new way of securing the well-being of and a sustainable living for both their actual and future generation of citizens, and also new ways to stimulate integrated approach as holistic response to the short-term global challenge such as the COVID-19, as well as the medium and longer-term global challenge such as climate change. During the 2019 first Goyang City Forum, I had the privilege to attend an agenda for a sustainable and happy city where people and nature coexist in harmony was among the key outcomes. A roadmap was set with 6 visionary pillars that brought out the city's leadership, its ability to use integrated approach to address the ecologic, sociopolitical, economic, and cultural dimension of sustainability. I would like also to take the opportunity to congratulate Goyang City for important achievements since the first forum. This demonstrates voluntarism, proactiveness, and responsibility. I learned that Jangang wetline is now listed as Ramsar wetline since May 21st, 2021. Goyang City is preparing for the fourth industrial revolution and is positioning itself as a growth hub city through the Ilsan Techno Valley, which is a base for innovation and growth of the regional economy of Goyang City. Goyang City is also a champion on lifelong learning for all, with anyone being able to learn anywhere at any time, thanks to enhanced accessibility of learning, diversity of learning, and sustainability of learning. And with the opening in 2024 of the Kintex Exhibition Hall 3, Goyang City will be able to grow into a global MICE city and one of the largest self-sufficient cities in Korea. Cities need to be reinvented, including their relationship to people and nature, by relocalizing production so that cities are generative rather than extractive, preservative and restorative rather than destructive, and empowering rather than alienating, where prosperity flourishes and people have purposeful, meaningful work that they enjoy, that enables them to use their passion and talent. We compliment Goyang City for striving to build a smarter, wiser, and happier future following that pathway. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for getting to send us the congratulatory message on behalf of the UNFCCC. UNFCCC를 대표해서 역시 잊지 않고 이렇게 축하 메시지 보내주신 마삼바.
Thank you very much, Program Manager Masamba Tioye. And last but not least, we would like to invite the next speaker who has delivered congratulatory remarks. Professor Mark Southcombe from London University has delivered his congratulatory message.
Tēnā katoa katoa. Greetings from Te Heringawaka, Wellington University, New Zealand. To Mayor Jae-jun Lee, city officials, Jung Kwang-sab, Lee Kwang-sab, Kim Jin-won, Lee Chung-yung, councillors, honoured guests, trusted delegates, and citizens. I remember fondly the positive and forward-thinking Goyang City International Forum of 2019 that linked ideas and proposed actions to your local communities and had a vision of an environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable future. This is a compelling, achievable vision, both learning from other successful natural and built environments and with careful attention to your local needs and opportunities to create a people-orientated city where history, culture and the arts are in full bloom. I valued the welcome and introduction to your city, strong culture and the depth of your history, and enjoyed the warmth and openness of the people I met. Since the 2019 forum, the world has changed significantly from the effects of COVID-19 global pandemic on all of our communities. And we acknowledge these effects and are sorry for the losses in your country and in your city. We in New Zealand have been fortunate to be insulated from the worst effects of the pandemic, but we're also affected by losses of trade, opportunities, and of course losses in the ability to travel and changes in the way we work, and that face-to-face communication can occur. Our relationship with Goyang City continued through my work as Special Advisor throughout 2020, and with significant information support coming from Goyang City officials and Urban Regeneration teams, as we undertook a university student project together. The collective student project explored opportunities to redevelop and renew the Wandang Sangsa area in a way that retains the area's special heritage character and scale. The work occurred at a distance and with limited communication opportunities, and was affected by COVID-19 lockdowns, but it still resulted in a valuable vision, reimagining the sort of heritage adaptive redevelopment that could potentially occur in the area. A Wandang Sangsa strategic development plan identifying issues and opportunities in the area was created, and I understand that you will have an opportunity to see some of this vision in the current forum. We hope that you enjoy it and are inspired by it. I'm sorry that I will not be able to attend the forum in person this year. I send my university support and my own best wishes for a 2021 International Forum that is as visionary, practical, people-centred and as successful as the last one. And I look forward to the next steps and the possibility of being with you all in person again at some future time. Kia ora tātou and warm regards from New Zealand.
Thank you. Thanks to the Professor Southcombe for your warm-hearted message to congratulate the opening of today's forum. 네, 정말 따뜻한
Thank you very much, Professor Southcombe of Victoria University. Thank you very much. Professor Southcombe is also a member of the International Advisory Committee for Goyang City. It was a great pleasure to meet him through video. And we are joined by great speakers and panelists today, and those of you who are joining us online, even though they cannot meet us face to face, I would like to ask all of you who are here to look at the camera on the right side, and please give them a big round of applause to all the speakers and panelists who will be joining us online.
고맙습니다. 오늘 클래스
Thank you very much. We're joined by Professor Simone Carrera, Professor Watkins, and all the panelists.
고맙습니다. Thank you.
And thank you very much for joining us today. Since 2019, Goyang City Forum has started to create an inclusive city in Goyang. So let us take a look at the history of Goyang City Forum through the video. Asking the future of sustainable Goyang, and 2 years later, meeting the natural environment in Goyang with the citizens of Goyang City. With the citizens, looking back on the past and present of the city of Goyang with the citizens, we have planned for the next 100 years of Goyang City with the citizens. The citizens of Goyang, who are the owners of the city, have convened here all together. Goyang City Forum is dreaming of a city where citizens are truly happy, sustainable city and happy citizens. Goyang City Forum.
그렇습니다.
Yes. The first Goyang City Forum started in 2019, and we have shared and created the vision of making Goyang City a beautiful, sustainable city where citizens are truly happy, and we are about to open the second chapter here. And I would like to thank you all for sharing your time with us today. Now we will deliver the keynote speech, answering the future of the city, and this keynote presentation is going to set the ground for the further discussion that will ensue. And we would like to now invite Mayor Lee Jae-jun of the Goyang City for the keynote presentation.
예, 반갑습니다. 고양시장 이재주입니다. 도시는 사람.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Cities are the greatest invention of the humanity that has been drawn on the ground that used to house Garden of Eden. People were overwhelmed by grand cities. They aspired bigger cities, and the cities sucked the resources and huge population like a black hole. The cities have become a place that needs to be admired rather than a space where we live in. People began to look for better and more luxurious place of residence. And those who lost their domicile because of the urban development have begun wandering the city as urban nomads. City suppliers try to create cities that sell better. As a result, 30-story high skyscraping apartment buildings were built right next to an old house. And there were apartment complexes that had no entrance or access road. It was truly bizarre cities. And at the same time, cities have achieved remarkable growth, and people were carried away with such ideals that they could build reasonable and ideal cities. And the output of such arrogance can be symbolized as Pruitt-Egoe, the modernism architecture city of the United States. After the Second World War, the US government demolished a slum in St. Louis, and in that place built a large-scale public housing project named Pruitt-Igoe. The city was highly effective and had all the convenience of residential space. The government thought that if they built a perfect building, all the ills and problems of the society will be resolved. However, the results were devastating. The cities became hollowing, and it became a hotbed. All kinds of crimes of the city, it became a living hell for the residents. So in just 20 years after the construction, the Pruitt-Igoe was bombed by the creator, the public sector of the city. Pruitt-Igoe was the result of the arrogance and misjudgment of the humanity, believing that people's happiness could be created by rational and efficient cities. Cities that have become excessively commercialized and rationalized is very vulnerable to the smallest shock from outside. Lions have less than 5% success rate in hunting. However, the lions manage to survive because they know that if they make one more trial after 19 failures, they will be able to succeed. And that's why they have been able to survive in this competition. However, Even the last remaining trial does not guarantee us survival in these hyper uncertainties. The future itself is uncertainty. Uncertainty creates horror and threat to us. People, in order to relieve themselves of anxiety, began to create plans, regulations, and developed technologies trying to control the future. However, in this era of hyper uncertainties, the fact that there could be a crisis around the corner is a horror. COVID-19 outbreak that took place in early last year has created so much social consequences and shock, like economic lockdown and mobility restriction. And not knowing how the crisis will turn has created horror to many people. These days, cities are just a grouping of buildings and cities, and they are not organism by itself. They cannot absorb the shock. It is just an unflexible entity. Therefore, the shock and the danger of the city is passed on to the individuals who live in the cities. 8 out of 10 people who died of COVID-19 are elderly people more than 60 years of age, and many of them were living in nursing facilities. Those who are not economically well off had to live in welfare facilities or nursing facilities, whereas economically well off people had the luxury of staying in large houses and hotels and large cars. Cities have charged residential costs to those who were poor and those who were rich, but the cost of disaster was solely charged on socially vulnerable people. The passive entities, the cities that have failed to respond to the shock, is very vulnerable to the second and third COVID-19 pandemic. They are just repeating the same message that you can be assured because we have the vaccine and therapy. The suppliers of the cities will create new type of capitalism, namely disaster capitalism, to maintain the solidity of the cities and the order. The citizens were feeling quite helpless, thinking only the government and suppliers can control the cities. And they always believed that there could be a better product, and they have hoped one day they would be able to purchase a better product. They thought that they might remain a consumer of the city, and we now have to decide whether we are going to remain as a consumer of the city or become the citizens who will be actively engaged in regenerating the cities. We are no longer the passive consumers of the cities. We need to be active producers of the city. The best city is the city where I live in. Citizens are not just consuming the city, they have the obligation to care for and develop the city as their own house. The level of intervention of citizens in the urban affair is very low because most of the cities these days have built not based on the social consensus. The cities that I could not control, people often gave up on that kind of cities, demolished that kind of cities. Therefore, the meaning of urban regeneration can be found in the process of regeneration. Urban regeneration is not just fixing a couple of old buildings. We are saying goodbye to the planned cities planned by someone else and creating a new city based on the residents' consensus. The Hafen city, the port city of Germany, is the most successful case study of urban generation. The city has listened to the residents' opinion, and it took them 10 years to engage them in this process. The main players in the urban regeneration New Deal projects are resident councils and village cooperatives. In the process of fixing the old cities, these citizens are reborn as the genuine and passionate citizens of the city. Hundreds of thousands of people live in the cities, and cities are always full of irrational contradictions. Sometimes we try to ignore downplay the characteristics of the cities and try to make it highly efficient and rational. Sometimes we are obsessed with the scale of economy and create cities that are solely categorized as office towns, bed towns, or commercial cities. The cities, if they have only one single functions, they're very vulnerable to crisis. The houses that are built of wood will be destroyed by the smallest embers. The plains of Arizona, when the pumas disappeared from the plains, the grassland soon turned into wasteland. And the cities cannot accommodate the lives of people living in the city. The world is wide, we can travel anywhere, but the space of living for one person is less than 20 kilometers in terms of radius. Instead of spending time in luxurious atoll where it takes 4 hours to travel, we spend more time in the park benches in our neighborhood. The cities should be complete entity that allows us to enjoy various elements of life without spending too much time or money. The Chonglak, which is the traditional units of Korean villages, is a space that encompasses residential, livelihood, leisure, and social relations. The small cities, the modern cities should also be like small but complete Chonlaks. And we are now on the bus destined for the horrible precipice of climate confusion. The bus will arrive at the destination in less than 10 years at the earliest, and the shock will hit the weakest link first. When the energy supply goes down, the buses in the outskirts of the town will stop, and the cost of transportation will go up. When countries around the world impose carbon tax, our exports will be restricted, and subcontractor factories will shut down, and irregular workforce will lose their jobs first. Climate change ruins our soils, and people who leave their domicile because of the flood will become the climate refugees. Climate change is something that individuals cannot resolve on their own, but climate change sounds like a distant future that we don't feel in our skin yet, and it's difficult to specify the perpetrator. Nobody takes responsibility for environment. We only have bystanders when it comes to environment. Therefore, we must find the answers to environment problems in the fundamental structures of the cities. The original form of modern city is roads and buildings, and they're connected by artificial landscape that imitate nature. Separating the cities from the nature and artificially deciding how many trees should be planted where, this kind of urban design where the supplier makes all the decisions has made modern cities quite vulnerable to heavy snowfalls and wildfires. The people and nature must coexist. Anything that coexists does not need approval from others. They will maintain their life in the place of where they were born and then naturally go extinct. Nature is not a side dish for the humans, it's a member that we have to coexist together. Just creating some areas of green next to the apartment complex or adding few kilowatts to the renewable energy is not coexistence. But we cannot stop the cities from growing. We have to find the best way to coexist together in our daily lives. The Swedish city of Malmö, which is known as the model case of eco-friendly regenerated city, has 54-story commercial and residential building called Turning Torso, and it is fueled by sunlight, wind farms, rainwater from the roof, and geothermal energy. All the new buildings built in the housing development sites of Goyang city will be designed as green buildings that uses photovoltaic energy and emits less greenhouse gas. We are going to create forests around 6 streams, create wind path in the urban area, sending the micro dust to the outskirts and bringing the cool air into the urban centers. And Changang wetland will be restored as a carbon storage site. The green infrastructure in our city will change our cities to create less carbon emission and a city where we can live in happiness and peace with the nature. Rational cities will treat citizens as a function or product. They will only focus on the commercial value of the people, and when their lifespan is exhausted, the citizens will be abandoned by the cities. In the organic cities, the old and outdated buildings are fixed through urban regeneration. Same thing should happen for the people. Old people who do not have any relevant skills or capabilities, they must be retrained and they should be allowed to enter the society and economy once again. They are the main entities of the urban life, not merely the objects. And you don't have to have a special space or special preparation to learn. Finding the opportunity for learning in the urban environment is the true form of learning. Learning is melted in our daily lives. The same house, the meaning of a house is assigned by the people who live in the house, and the functions can change depending on who uses the space. Stable is just as stable if it only has fodder inside, but it can be a great workshop if it has tools inside. Cities, the value of the city will be determined by how people use the cities. There is no single savior in the future of humanity. The future is made up of multiple paths, and we are the ones who are creating the path. Cities can change us, but we can also change the cities. In order to regenerate the cities, we need to find a way to regenerate the thoughts, mindset, livelihood of the citizens who live in the cities, to change the city, and this is how I would like to answer the questions presented by Goyang City Forum. Thank you very much.
네, 고맙습니다. 아파하는 도시
Thank you very much. Now we have learned why we need to think deep and hard about the meaning of future cities. I would like to thank Mayor Lee Jae-jun of Goyang City for the wonderful and insightful keynote presentation. Thank you very much. So we have now concluded the opening ceremony now, and we will start the first session of Goyang City Forum at 6 o'clock. And at 6 o'clock, we will kick off lifelong learning session, and we'll talk about post-COVID-19 changes in lifelong learning environment and policy responses.
많은 관심 부
I would like to ask you all to join us in the first session. See you at 6 o'clock.
그리고 잠시 안내 네, 잠시 안내드리겠습니다. 잠시 후 6시부터
Ladies and gentlemen, the lifelong learning session will start at 6 o'clock. Please take a seat.
평생학습 세션에서도 영어와 한국어 동시 통역 서비스가 제공이 됩니다.
And we are also providing you with simultaneous interpretation services for the first session, lifelong learning.
The first session will begin at 6 o'clock. Will begin at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Please take your seats. And as you're available to all, please turn off your cell phone or put them on silent mode. And also, simultaneous interpretation will provide you. Please use your service on your table during the forum. Channel 1 for Korean, 2 for English. Thank you. 고맙습니다. 그리고 아마 현장에서 질문 있으신 분들 계실 텐데요. 저희 포럼 공식
If you have any questions, please register your questions in the chatting window for the YouTube channel or the website of Goyang City. And we'll select a few questions to be answered. So if you have any questions, please register your questions in the YouTube channel chatting window.
네, 여러분 반갑습니다. 다시 인사.
Ladies and gentlemen, nice to meet you again. So the first session of Goyang City Forum is lifelong learning session. My name is Moon Sori. So we'll deal with the theme of COVID-19, post-COVID-19 era changes in lifelong learning environment. We have 3 speakers and we will have a panel discussion with a moderator and 3 panelists afterwards. During the panel discussion session, we are going to open the floor to the online participants and select several questions registered by the online participants and ask those questions to the panelists. So if you have any questions, please write them down in the chatting window. And already a lot of citizens have left their questions. Mr. Chung Il-yong has said that smart city will be the golden standard of cities in the future, and Mr. Park has said that we need to create a younger cities. Now we are going to kick off the first session, and the first speaker is team leader Mr. Raul Valdez-Covera from UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning. He will talk about lifelong learning, performance management system meaning and necessity. Please watch the video.
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's my pleasure to present today in this Goyang meeting. My name is Raul Valdez, representing UIL, UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, based in Hamburg, Germany. I will present today ways of monitoring lifelong learning, and I will cover 6 main topics. First, I will give a short introduction to the concept of lifelong learning and the international and national initiatives for monitoring lifelong learning, some examples, of course. The promotion and implementation of lifelong learning in cities through the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities, informing the monitoring and evaluation of lifelong learning, particularly at the local level. Number 3, what are the implications of educational planning in cities for the monitoring of lifelong learning? Based very much on a survey that was organized by the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning and the Institute for Education and Planning. Number 4, I will put some emphasis on what we have been developing through the key features of learning cities, that it's a set of indicators at the local level. Number 5, examples of monitoring and evaluation from cities. We'll give examples from Goyang and also from Sonderborg in Denmark. At the end, I would like just to give some key questions for reflection for the further development of monitoring and evaluation frameworks for lifelong learning in cities. So I will start mainly referring to this concept of lifelong learning that has been already debated for the last 50 years. Lifelong learning is mainly rooted in the integration of learning and living, covering learning activities for people of all ages, talking about children, young people, adults, elderly, girls, boys, women, men, in all life-wide contexts, family, school, community, and through a variety of modalities, mainly formal, non-formal, informal, which together meet a wide range of learning needs and demands. So it's responding to specific needs and demands from the learner. As we can see, there are 5 main components that these essentials form or contribute to the definition. There can be plenty of definitions, but it's important to consider that it must concern really all age groups, all levels of education, all spheres and spaces, and a variety of purposes. So these 5 essentials need to be always considered when thinking about lifelong learning in the diversity of definitions we could find. What is important now is that lifelong learning is not just this conceptual definition that we describe, but also it's now very strongly referring to the international agendas, and I would like to refer to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and very much to the SDG 4, Sustainable Development Goal 4, which is education quality. The aim of SDG 4 is the promotion of inclusive and quality education and the promotion of lifelong learning for all. So it's very much now in the international arena. And again, there's a lot of interest on lifelong learning, but always a question on how to promote lifelong learning, how to monitor lifelong learning, how to go through this magic line for thinking that lifelong learning is important in order to make it happen. And for that, I would like to share some examples that some countries decide to initiate in order to measure lifelong learning. And I would like to refer just to 3 of them to give a glance of what has been happening. And I will start with this Composite Learning Index, CLI, from Canada, that was presented for the International Conference on Adult Education. That was 2009. And it's a very interesting annual measure of progress in lifelong learning, which it's aligned with the four pillars of the law report, meaning learning to know, to do, to live together, and to be. So on these four pillars, we have a set of 17 indicators with 25 statistical measures, considering, in a way, cities, but specific units such as schools, home, work, and within the community. The CLI run for 2 years, and it brought very interesting results, but unfortunately didn't continue. However, the second one, this ELI, European Lifelong Learning Indicators, is very much based on the Canadian index, and it was put in place in Europe. This was run by the Bertelsmann Foundation in Germany and supported by the European Union, and also based on the four Delors dimensions, and it's describing levels of lifelong learning among the European countries. I think it's very contextualized to the European reality, and has a total of 36 variables, so much more than the CLI, and accessible also to a wider audience. This was starting in 2011 and run for 3 years. Unfortunately, because of the European Union funding, couldn't continue, but also shows very good ways of dealing with the monitoring of lifelong learning. Something that is more actual, and I think it's quite relevant, is the Index for Lifelong Learning in Singapore. It's run by the Institute of Adult Learning, and the Singapore Index is based on 6 dimensions of lifelong learning, considering formal, work-related issues, social, personal, technologies, learning to learn, and it's considering international and local measures related to lifelong learning. They have been having surveys already for twice. I think already 3 years working on that, so it's quite interesting. I would like to focus more on what has been done at the local level, and mainly through the UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities that, as you know, it's a network that was funded starting operations in 2012 and open to membership in 2016. Now we have more than 200 learning cities. And the idea is not just to have a definition on what is a learning city, but also how to measure progress of a learning city. So it's very much related to the monitoring of lifelong learning at the local level. The important thing here is that we have the chance in the network to have a special analysis on the monitoring and evaluation at the local level and how cities are planning this process. So based on a survey, we get some important key takeaways that I think could be very interesting for cities to know. Just as knowing that 56% of the cities have their own education strategy monitoring and evaluation system. That of the cities that have already these EMIs, most of them are really related to public school and not so to private school, and also very much focused on the formal and not so much on the non-formal education institutions. Also that cities tend to use EMIs for infrastructure provision and student information, and less on household information and learning outcomes. Also interesting to note is that 69% of cities have a unit in charge of collecting and interpreting the data and formulating different scenarios of the future. The rest, 30%, do not have it. And important to mention that when selecting changes to the monitor and evaluation of a city, strategy, most cities identify lack of human resources to conduct the evaluation, almost 67%, and also financial resources limitations, that's 63%. So it's just to note a little bit how cities are coping with this collecting data. Next one, please. It's very important that on that basis of trying to monitor the local level, as I mentioned before, the GNLC developed the key features of learning cities. The key features are based on the different elements that constitute the development of a learning cities, and we have, as you could see in the UNESCO temple, 12 different components. 3 of them are the fundamental conditions for building a learning cities. 6 pillars, which are the major building blocks for building learning cities, and then the results, which are the wider benefits in the top of the temple for building a learning city. And each of these 12 components have a set of indicators in order to monitor progress. I will not go too much in detail, but just to show you how it works in concrete way. So we have, for example, in the major building block of a learning city, to promote inclusive learning in the education system. And for that, we have a set of possible indicators, and we have them in the just beside the main major building block, and it's expanding access to early childhood care and education. Number 2, expanding access to education from primary to tertiary level. Number 3, expanding access and participation in adult education and vocational training. And then each one has the concrete way of measuring the indicator. For example, for 2.1.1, it's enrollment in pre-primary education. What is the net enrollment rate in pre-primary education based on ISCET or any other measurement? And then what kind of indicators we have for that? For this, the proposal is to have official data provided by the city authorities and then divided by gender. So each of the 42 indicators are presented in these tables, so cities could follow up on that. Of course, what we could see is that not all cities have the structure and the infrastructure to really report on all these 42 indicators. But at least it's a basis for them to consider which ones are relevant, which one should be used based on their own challenges. We have another one here that is related to revitalizing learning in families and communities, and then how to measure that, establishing community-based learning spaces and providing resources for learning and families and communities. And then how to evaluate the infrastructure, and if this should come from official data, which or should be from experts' review, or should be the result of a survey. That the indicators are very much quantitative, but we have also some qualitative indicators that could be useful. Next one, please. On that basis, on the basis of the key indicators for developing learning cities, some cities have been able to consider this as a reference in order to continue their own process. And I would like to give some examples. I think our host city has been working quite intensive on this topic. Goyang has their own lifelong learning city indicator system. And as I mentioned before, it's very much developed with some reference to the key features of learning cities, and will be a separate model based on the unique context and challenges of Goyang. The municipal government will use these indicators to measure the city's performance in lifelong learning in one side, and also to monitor its development as a learning city as such. So grouping of indicators will be framed by objectives that follow the learning city development process. So it will be very interesting to see how this is progressing. But I think it's a good example of how to use some of the elements that are already in place and to contextualize to their own challenges and realities. Another example that could be also interesting for you to learn more is this from Sonderborg in Denmark. They have what they call 4742, that it's an approach to building and monitoring their learning city development. And basically, it's considering 4 political commitments: environmental, economic, social, and cultural sustainability. Considering the 17 is for the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the focus of a quality education, mainly focusing on Goal 4, Sustainable Energy Goal 7, and Partnership Goal 17. And the 42 represents precisely the 42 features of a learning city as defined in the network. So they are also working on this dimension, and I think it's also some important experience to follow. Next one, please. I think that this has been quite succinct and fast. We could have more discussion on this, but some of the elements I would like to highlight as questions for discussion, for continued analysis, for further research are the following. What forms of lifelong learning implementation can be realistically monitored and evaluated in cities? Which sources of data are available or disaggregated at the local level? This is quite important as some of them are naturally in place because they are needed for the national census, whatever. So I think that's important to know. Where data is unavailable, how can it be generated? Through survey, through experts, through reviews, what mechanisms and statistical departments needs to be in place. Number 4, how can data generating exercises be made feasible for cities? What's the cost? What's the time? What are the resources in general? Number 5, how general should an international set of indicators remain in order to be globally applicable? I think this is a very important point because how could a set of indicators could be able to respect the different realities, the different contexts, the different levels of governments, and what can be applicable in different realities, different contexts, different regions of the world. Number 6, what level of opportunities for contextualization need to be built into a framework developed at the international level? So that is relevant to cities or not? So I think this also brings this dimension of the level of government. Where do we need to focus and what kind of key features, indicators we need for that particular purpose? I think this will bring some elements to continue discussing, and with this I would like to thank you very much for listening and willing very much to try to answer to your questions. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. 고맙습니다. 유네스코 평생학습
So, team leader Raul Valdez Cotera of UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning has shared the details of the reasons why we need to manage performance management, why we need to monitor. And now we will move on to the second presentation by Director Andreas Schleier of OECD Education and Skills. He will talk about bridging the lifelong learning gap. He will join us through the video.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to the Goyang City Forum. It's so inspiring to see your city advancing to make lifelong learning a reality for all. And that's needed in the times in which we live, in which labor markets are polarizing. People with the right skills have more and more opportunities, while people with poor skills are left further behind. New forms of work are emerging. Labor markets are polarizing. Automation is kicking in. Technology has been incredibly socializing. Everybody can collaborate, work together, engage. But it's also concentrated power at a rate we've never seen before. Technology has been incredibly particularizing. The smallest voice can be heard everywhere. You post something on WeChat and the world can follow you. But it's also incredibly homogenizing, squashing individual, uniqueness, cultural differences. Technology has been incredibly empowering. The most successful companies these days are not created by a big industry. They are created by a big idea. Often they have the product before they get the money. But technology can also be incredibly disempowering. When we become the slaves of algorithms that we no longer understand. If you look at the emerging companies, they are driven by new platform technologies. Small units of employment with global reach require the rethinking of what small means. A small company with a few employees can change the world of tomorrow. Peer-to-peer markets are blurring the distinction between who is the consumer, who is the business, and governments also increasingly thrive on platform technology. Some people associate technology with jobs being lost, but actually our data at the OECD from our survey of adult skills show that actually digital intensive workplaces are much better at extracting value from the skills of people, converting better skills into better jobs and better lives of people. And that's not just true for technology skills. You can see here for virtually every skill category for which we have measures. A digital intensive kind of workplace provides better opportunities, more earnings for people now. We also know that technology-rich workplaces keep people learning from their co-workers. People, learn less from books and kind of prepared instruction. They learn more by doing. And actually, they're more likely to keep up to date. The modern place of working is always a place of learning. And we can see there seems to be a very close relationship between the skills of populations here on the vertical axis and the risk of automation. You're on the left side, you can see countries where actually the skills tend to be strong and the risk of automation is quite low. On the right side, you're moving towards countries where the risk of automation is high, and often these are the countries where skill levels are lower. So the best insurance, for a safe workplace, for a future-oriented workplace, is to invest in better skills throughout our lives. Now, what's quite disturbing, when we looked at this among young people through our international PISA assessment, we asked them, what would you like to do in your life when they were 15 years old? And actually, it's quite striking that in many countries, actually a significant share of young people is dreaming of jobs that will no longer exist when they graduate. And particularly so for young people from disadvantaged families. 30%, 40%, sometimes 50%, sort of aspire to jobs that are at high risk of automation. Part of, a lifelong learning culture will be to give young people more realistic, expectations of the future, of the work of tomorrow, of the kind of skills they'll need to invest in. We cannot predict the future, but we need to prepare ourselves for, different options, different possibilities. Imagine the future. And you cannot be what you cannot see. Our data also show that the career expectations of young people are often rather myopic. you can see 50% of 15-year-old girls are just looking towards 10 jobs when there are hundreds of jobs available in the economy now. And career concentration in the dreams and aspirations of young people has increased. No? Job expectations have become more myopic when actually the world became richer. We're not doing a good job in preparing people for the real world. School is often very reductive, very narrow in its orientation. Well, let's look at what about the actual skills of people. We tested the digital problem-solving skills of people in the workforce, in the population. And here you can see this is the share of older adults, 55 to 65-year-olds, who have decent digital problem-solving skills, who are well prepared for the technology-rich world in which we live. And you can see in a country like the United States or New Zealand, it's about 20% of adults, of older workers, who are fit for the world. In most countries, it's just 10%. And now you're going to tell me, well, that's all solved for the next generation, the digital natives that are, born with the new technologies. And yes, digital skills look better in the next generation, here among 25 to 34-year-olds. But if you look at this closely enough, it's still only about half of 25 to 34-year-olds who are reasonably equipped for the digital world in which we live today. Every second young person is a digital native, born into the digital world, but not equipped for the digital world. And the relative position of countries has also changed dramatically. United States used to be at the frontier. Now it's just an average performer. Same for the UK. Used to be at the frontier. Now an average performer. If you look at, the laggard of the past, Singapore, the older generation is not very well prepared because in the past education wasn't very well developed. Today, together with Finland and Sweden in Europe, Singapore is at the frontier. This really shows, you can change that picture. And China, too, is one of the most rapidly improving education systems. The past is not determining the future. Education can change that dynamic. Now, the nature of skills is also very important. The kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, are also easy to digitize, to automate, to outsource these days. Routine cognitive skills are disappearing. And that's a real challenge for education. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are very good at repeating what we tell them. We need to think harder about what makes us human in a world of artificial intelligence. How do we complement, not substitute, the artificial intelligence we created in our computer? Technology-intensive tasks are on the rise, and you put the two things together, and you know about the future of work. Some people call this a race between technology and education. Before the first industrial revolution, neither technology nor education made a big difference for the vast majority of people. People were living in the countryside and were quite self-sufficient. But then came the first industrial revolution, moving technology ahead of the skills of people and causing huge amount of social pain. People were not ready, not prepared for the digital world. But then, we built schools, we made, people compatible with the requirements of the industrial age, and actually that created generations of prosperity. But since then, we haven't changed the model very much. And today we see the digital revolution once again racing ahead of the skills of people and causing the same amount of social pain. We have young people graduating from university and having a hard time finding a good job, even in China. And at the very same time, Chinese employers say, we cannot find the people with the skills that we need. The question ahead of us is, how do we move again? Education, the skills of people ahead of the, technology of our times. Let me quantify this. Among the OECD countries, we have measured the skills of adults. I showed you already a picture. About 20% of adults are very poorly skilled when it comes to advanced literacy skills. They can, read like about a 10-year-old child. For some it looks better, for others it looks good, and for few it looks great. And then we ask ourselves, if we gave, modern computers with artificial intelligence, the same kind of task that we give to humans, how would they score? And the result is this, basically, near-term computer capabilities are at the 70% of humans. That means we need to think much, much harder about the future skills that will make us successful. In these days, all our eyes are fixed on the pandemic, but the future will always surprise us. Climate change is going to, change our lives more profoundly than the pandemic did. Artificial intelligence is going to be far more disruptive than the pandemic, putting everything to a test. And there will be many other trends that will fundamentally shape the world around us and our education systems. Again, we cannot predict the future, but we need to become better at thinking about alternative futures now. If we are agile enough and we can imagine and prepare ourselves for alternative futures, we will probably be best prepared for the future that will eventually materialize. Of course, one future is the status quo. Basically just learning will, education will evolve, gradually improve, and so on. In some countries, that may be true, but actually in others, it will be a great challenge. Once again, look about, the future and the past. If I look at the skills of older people, literacy skills here, and younger people, you can see generally younger people are more ahead of older ones. But the pace of change has changed dramatically. I already mentioned Singapore. And the older generation was very poorly prepared. The young generation has moved to the frontier. Also in Chile and South America, it doesn't look great today, but it has hugely improved. France, moving to the average. Germany, starting from the average and moving beyond the average. Lithuania, New Zealand. But then you see countries like the United States, the United Kingdom, where young people moving into the labor market are no longer better skills than those, going for retirement. So our education systems are not necessarily advancing at the speed at which we need to evolve. Another scenario is, maybe people are starting to look for alternatives. Our education systems are too slow, too bureaucratic, too heavy, too old-fashioned, and people are starting to use technologies to actually look for alternatives. And there are amazing opportunities. In fact, in many, Chinese provinces, you can see modern technology like artificial intelligence making its way into classrooms. Artificial intelligence can make learning so much more granular, so much more adaptive, so much more interactive. And it can engage with learners of all ages. You can use it at home, at the workplace, in school, and so on. While you study mathematics on a computer, the computer can now study how you study and then adapt the learning environment to your learning needs. Amazing possibilities. Assessments and exams, one of the biggest mistakes we made in education is to divorce learning from assessment and exam. We pile up huge amount of knowledge, hours and hours of learning, and then one day we tell people, now come back, tell us everything that you have learned in a very constrained and often very kind of reductive environment. Well, in the future with technology, we can reintegrate learning and assessment. While you study, you can get feedback on where you can become better. Teachers can get real-time information of how students learn differently. And schools and school systems can see how their learners are progressing. At the workplace, at home, and in institutions. Amazing possibilities for the future of exams. And then you think about learning analytics. In fact, this is what I saw in some classrooms in Shanghai. You have actually technology that can see how different students learn differently, and that gives teachers real-time information about, how they can and should structure the learning environment, empowering teachers to embrace the diversity of learning styles, even in big classrooms. So those are the possibilities, but I want to give you one warning signal here. In our latest PISA study, we studied the technology intensity in classrooms and learning outcomes. And actually, one of the things that we saw is that often, the more technology was in the classroom, the worse the learning outcomes. And this doesn't necessarily speak against technology, but it tells us that, technology is only as good as it's actually being used in learning. Often we have, technologies of the 21st century, students of the 21st century, but we have pedagogies of the 20th century and a school organization of the 19th century. And that doesn't go well together. We need to become better at designing pedagogies around this. We need to make teachers not just good instructors, but also creative designers of innovative learning environments and learners of all ages. One scenario is, schools will become community hubs. They will integrate many functions of our societies, our communities. But then we need to reinvest more in capacities. Maybe schools one day will not just be for the young, but will be there for learners of all ages. People will move between the workplace and the school, keep learning, keep working. Integrating lifelong learning will become a culture for all of this. Or maybe, one day learning will just happen anytime, anywhere, anyhow. But again, for that scenario to become realistic, we need to invest a lot in innovation. And very little of that is happening. When you compare the global education venture capital that is invested in education, it's still tiny. But it's changed also in composition. In the year 2014, it was mainly a story about the United States. Nowadays, it's mainly a story about China. Most of the innovative ideas, the global education venture capital, is generated and spent in China. That positions the country well. But also, it means, we still need to make education a more innovative kind of global enterprise. It's still, tiny compared with other sectors. But the last challenge I want to leave you with is this. We used to learn to do the work. And suddenly, learning has become the work. If you think to the past, everything was logical. You went to school, then to university or college or vocational education. Then you do your job, and one day you retire. Nowadays, we need to invest much more in the earliest years. Lifelong learning is not just about older people. It's also to do with how do we invest in the very youngest. Some of the social and emotional skills that make us successful in life. Curiosity, empathy, courage, leadership. They're best developed in the very earliest years of our lives. Early childhood education and care will be much more important in a lifelong learning society. And then, tertiary education. We will probably no longer divide people up into people who go to university and vocational education. Again, those will be integrated. And then working and learning will be one and the same because we will keep moving between jobs. That is the future of the workplace. That's the future of learning. Well, if you think about firms as learning environments, there are some difficult questions that will arrive. In Goyang City, you need to decide how are we going to share the money that is required for learning at the workplace between the companies, between the workers, or between the government. What are the incentives for people to keep learning, to keep growing? Who will set the standards? Who will recognize this? How do we recognize the skill levels? Who will train the trainers at the workplace so that they become really, really good at educating? How do we certify skills in a digital world? Now we know when you go to school or university, you get a degree, stamped down. How do we actually recognize good learning at the workplace? We need to build a currency. We can use tools like micro-credentials, digital kind of environments, but at the end of the day, it's about finding good ways to recognize incremental learning so that employers can see what skills their workers have and workers can see actually where they can apply. How do we deal with people outside firms? That's the much harder question to answer. In Goyang City, you have many truck drivers. 20 years from now, maybe the cars and the trucks are automated. How do we invest today in the future of those people? These are the hard questions. For the unemployed people today, well, you can say government should retrain them. But what about people who are at high risk of losing their job in the future? What do we do today for them? What do we do about people who change their jobs? What do we do for people who work in the gig economy, the informal workplaces? And last but not least, very hard question on governance. New forms of work sometimes mean, fewer taxes being raised because we do not know how to tax some of those new forms of work. Decentralized information means also less control, how to manage systems. The link between education and jobs becomes more, tacit. It's no longer as direct. And ultimately, it's all about finding the right balance, the right balance between modernizing our current skilled systems and disrupting them to introduce a new culture of lifelong life-wide learning. How do we reconcile new goals with old structures? How do we rebalance the global and the local? How do we foster innovation in a very conservative kind of social environment for education? How do we realize the potential with the current realities? How do we integrate the virtual and the face-to-face? And how do we reconfigure the spaces, the people, the time and the technology to prepare learners of all ages for their future, not our past? Well, I hope you find some good answers to these questions at the Goyang City Forum.
고맙습니다. 평생학습
Thank you very much. Director Shalaya has talked about bridging the lifelong learning gap, and we'll move on to the third presentation. He is here with us, President Kang Dae-jung of National Institute of Lifelong Education is here. He will talk about formation of civic subjectivity and urban growth through lifelong learning. Please welcome President Kang with a big hand.
이 오늘 귀한 자리에
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me at the Goyang City Forum. Especially through lifelong education, Goyang City is aimed at promoting happiness among the citizens. So once again, personally, I'm very happy to be here today. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, our daily life has been maintained by social distancing and contactless online communication. These two sides of a coin were predicted to some extent in the direction of social change even before COVID-19. As various social network services compete with each other, online communication is increasing and the radius of human activity is expanding with the cloud and virtual space. And once again, we were able to understand what could have happened, and we were expanding our activities. Although it was a direct result of the increase in the single-person household, new cultures such as drinking alone or eating alone set a trend. However, the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced home study and working at home, completely transformed the new standard of study and work life into digital space. It is creating a change that is different from the spread of individualism or the simple increase of online communication. These changes are something that is beyond our imagination. I'd like to introduce few numbers. As of April this year, the National Statistics Office said that online shopping transaction amounted to 15 trillion won, increase of 25.2%, and the use of food service such as delivery food increased by 56.5%, the largest increase. The amount of food and beverage shopping also increased by 29.5%. When the first confirmed case of the COVID-19 in Korea was confirmed at Incheon Airport, at quarantine on January 20, 2020, most Koreans did not expect that COVID-19 would cause such a big change. I don't think that anyone possibly imagined that this could happen. we had to adapt ourselves to these changes, and as we are trying to adapt to the daily changes brought about by the COVID-19, we begin to realize that the root cause of the emergence and the spread of the virus was caused by reckless environmental destructions. Remember that in the beginning that there was a case that a group of infection occurred after a meeting was held by a spraying salt water into the mouth with a sprayer in a religious facilities. News that an assault case took place when the police were dispatched after the quarrel with the passengers who did not wear masks on public transport was reported all over the world, and the refusal also to wear masks went beyond individual deviations and spread to a large group protest. And you could easily see what could have happened in Korea. Of course, we never had such a protest, but other advanced countries like Germany and United States, tens of thousands of people were gathered together and they demonstrated, protesting that they don't want to wear mask. As the Delta virus variants are spreading widely, we believe that India is where the variant started, and there was a saying that when people rub cow dung from head to toe, saying that it can prevent COVID-19, many male gather together and they rub themselves with the cow dung. And when this thing happened, they thought that the reason is because of the spread of the fake news. And through digital media, rapidly such fake news were spreading, people were following. That's why this thing happened. But what's more serious is that maybe this is the cause of the crisis that comes from the literacy. With the COVID-19, we're realizing how important it is to have literacy, to understand and use of information, to determine the authenticity and the value of information, and to judge and practice how to act for the future of oneself, one's neighbor, the planet, and mankind. So it's extremely important to equip ourselves with the power of literacy in the era of the COVID-19. This dissemination of the vaccines are spreading and the speed is accelerating. The COVID-19 pandemic naturally will end as we are able to create herd immunity. So we have strong expectations that when a herd immunity is realized, definitely we will be able to start the post-COVID era because we can recover the economy and also we can ease the social distancing when we reach the herd immunity and renew the social atmosphere. However, there are also concerns about the post-COVID era because there are households whose income decreases and a lot of self-owned business people, they are suffering and it is highly unlikely that they can recover their business. Nationally, post-COVID needs to be prepared, but with the snowballing budget, once again, this can be a huge challenge for our next generation. Paralyzations of the economy and a huge snowballing that is also giving us a huge burden. If you look at the history of humanity, there's a saying that there could be a pre and post COVID-19. Because of such a huge impact given by the COVID-19, it means that humanity cannot return to the norms taken for granted in the past before COVID-19. Then the post-COVID-19 era will be a world in which new norms that mankind has not experienced in the past operate, and we can see that we are given the task of creating the world. In order to realize the unknown world and yet unexperienced future in reality, the new imagination and joint learning are once again required. The imagination has already been emphasized, and this is our task. However, the imagination is nothing new. We already had this in 1972 in relations with the future of education. there was a poor report, a UNESCO poor report known to us as a learning to be. And according to the 1972 UNESCO poor report, it says that there is a task that all the educator needs to focus in preparing people for the society. The message is simple. Technology transformation is very rapid, however, the education is not catching it up. And please allow me to quote what Director Andreas Schleyer mentioned from the OECD. For the first time in history, education is in a position to play a role in preparing people for a society that does not yet exist. This change, with regard to the role of education, can be easily understood by comparing the relative stability of past society with the rapid development of the modern world, and the era in which the mission of education must be nurtured. Children of whom we do not know can live in a world that they do not know. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on the lifelong learning environment. At the end of 2020, the National Life Institute of the Lifelong Education that I work for conducted a survey to confirm the changes in lifelong education participated due to COVID-19 among 1,000 adults aged 19 and over nationwide. Below, we will focus on the result of the survey to examine the impact of COVID-19 on lifelong education. Of the 1,000 survey participants, 381 experienced lifelong education participation in the last 3 years until March 2020 before the outbreak of the COVID-19 in earnest. Among them, 100 people participated in lifelong education for the past 3 years in a row, considering the lifelong learning participation rate of adults by the Ministry of Education, you can see was 40%. And among them, since March 2020, when COVID-19 began to spread rapidly, 214 people who have participated in lifelong education were surveyed. However, among 214, merely 66 people completed the course and 148 people canceled or stopped participating. The reason why they quit or cancel is because of the forced closure according to the quarantine guidelines, or withdrawal from classes due to the infection concern, or facing training focused on face-to-face activity such as practice, and because of the conditions for the contactless education at education institutions are not available, and they have converted the education program to contactless but inexperienced in using the device. These were the reasons. Out of 1,000 people who took part in surveyed, 786 people did not participate in lifelong education. The reason is because they gave up due to COVID-19, 106 said, and I was planning to participate but canceled, suspended. The curriculum was 59, and regardless of the COVID-19, people who answered the survey said, I'm not willing to participate, which amounted to 234 people. The COVID-19 gave a direct impact. Of course, it is different depending on the income level, gender, and also their age. And the extent of the impact of COVID-19 on lifelong education patients was differed. And to calculate this, we have come up with a special measure. And as you can see, that people above 60 years old were heavily influenced. And once again, you can see that male received a higher impact. And this can be interpreted as a social distancing was more strongly required by people in their 60s and older as COVID-19 became a more serious threat to the health of the elderly. For retirees, housewives, voluntary unemployed, the impact index reached a whopping, which was much, much higher. Probably the reason is because these were the people who enjoyed lifelong education after they retired or because they are housewives. But because of the COVID-19, they can no longer participate in the lifelong education. I didn't include in my slide, but about 66 people who completed the lifelong education despite the COVID-19. And if I calculate, there were around 83 cases. And how did we operate lifelong education for these people? And offline, face-to-face education, 14 people said yes, they have completed that. And the remaining people totally took part in online lifelong education or a hybrid lifelong education. So as you can see here, in the COVID-19 era, online related education increased drastically. During the COVID-19, there were a lot of YouTube channel, and as confirmed by the National Institute for Lifelong Education survey, many of the programs were able to be completed during COVID-19, and we tried to understand when online programs were introduced, and out of 1710, mostly they opened or started YouTube channel right after the COVID-19. And also in case of Goyang City, they start operating the YouTube channel during the COVID time. And also you can see that Kwanak or Yongin City, they all open like Kwanak, June the 2nd, and Yongin City, October 15, 2020. And if you look at Eunpyeonggu YouTube channel, which started in July 23rd, 2013, the quality, the number of the view, and also the diversity of the contents were not that high. However, due to COVID-19, you can see that online use of the lifelong education exploded. The increase in online communication in the field of lifelong education is intertwined with the digital transformation of our society as a whole. So once again, COVID-19 outbreak has made online use of lifelong education in earnest. Social and economic changes based on the development of intelligent information technology, the so-called fourth industrial revolution, have changed our daily lives even before the COVID-19. Artificial intelligence, big data, and cloud ecosystem have permeated every nook and cranny of our lives. But the speed and intensity of the digital transformation has increased due to COVID-19. As you're well aware of, before COVID-19 pandemic, the society has shifted to a society where all teachers across the country teach online and all students take classes online at home. But before COVID-19, we rarely had a Wi-Fi. And teachers were not allowed to get access to the cloud, but now they are. And the schools are enjoying a tremendous increase of the online usage. However, in other area, it is not. Seoul National University, where I used to work, students who receive online education purely are very much abundant during the COVID-19 era. And once again, people still complain that the environment is not mature enough. But if you look at companies, once again, there's a huge disparity. Large conglomerates are enabling their employees to work remotely, but small and medium-sized company employees, remote working is still quite difficult. Let's look at individual digital literacy and also the accessibility to the digital life is very much limited, especially the aged people or people with not much availability of the devices. They have difficulties. Together with the Ministry of Science and IT, we have once again tried to understand the disparity between the digital gap, and in order to understand digital literacy, we tried to find out 1,000 digital learning center we built it across the country. who are the owner or the formations of the civic identity? Who are they and how should we build that? Once again, the foremost importance is the formations of the civic identity. We put the word smart and then we call smart home or smart city or smart work or smart city. So whatever it is, we always use the word smart. But the people who live within the smart home, or the employee or workers who work at a smart workplace, or the citizens who live in the smart city, are they really smart? We need to think about that. So depending on the level of the smart, the disparity of their livelihood are very much different. So the future society, which has been partially experienced but has not yet been fully realized, demands the formations of the new citizen subject with a digital literacy. We need to increase the competency of the digital literacy. Second point that we need to pay attention is in the post-COVID era, sustainability of the planet, sustainability of the human being are critical. You know that in the animal world, there were COVID-19 virus which existed, but it was spread to the human being and became extremely fatal infectious disease. Why it didn't create any issues among the animals, but now a new infectious disease that have been prevalent recently originated from animal, but they mutate after being transferred to humans, spread rapidly. The reason that the strains of this infectious disease is transferred from animals to human is because human development activity destroys the ecosystem of other animals that humans have not been able to access. And that is the cause of such infectious disease. And with that virus, human beings are threatening other human beings. COVID-19, once again, we need to prepare how we can harmonize our life with other participants in the ecosystem. Once again, we need to pose a question how human beings should not pose a threat to the sustainability of the earth and sustainability of the mankind. The era calls for the formations of the citizen's entity as a living person who guarantees the sustainability of the earth, and the formations of citizen sector with the digital literacy skills and living people who guarantee the sustainability of the earth will become the important topic of lifelong learning policy in the future. The post-COVID era is a future that has yet to come. Strictly speaking, the future does not exist in the present moment. This is our task. Thank you.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. Now, in the face of a changed city, we definitely need lifelong learning, and we need to be ready to tackle the challenges presented by lifelong learning. Now, we would like to move on to the panel discussion session. For session one, I would like to invite moderator and panelists to the stage. First, Professor Shin Min-sun of Seoul Women's University will be the moderator and panelist. I would like to ask you to join us on the stage. Professor Yang Byung-chan of Kongju National University has joined us as one of the panelists, as well as Executive President Lee Sung-han from Hobi Institute, and the member of Goyang City Council, Kim Mi-soo, has joined us as panelists. So we are going to exchange our ideas and opinions on lifelong learning environment and policy response. I look forward to your participation as well. And now, Professor Shin Min-sun, the floor is yours now. Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Professor Shin Min-sun from Seoul Women's University. Nice to meet you all. And if my memory serves me right, I think it was in 2016 that I first began working with the Lifelong Relay Forum of Goyang City. And the impression I got from Goyang City was that it was really willing to work with its citizens. And it was a city that was ready to work with the city's citizens in establishing the policies for lifelong learning. And since then, it has become a brand for Goyang City. Lifelong learning has been the main attributes of Goyang City, and it has engaged in various labs and experiments. And this year, 140 citizens have gathered together to talk about lifelong learning. And what is truly amazing is that the theme that citizens discussed at that time is exactly, it matches the theme of Goyang City Forum. And Goyang City is very much dedicated to listening to the ideas and opinions of its citizens. And as you're well aware, we are joined by two speakers from overseas, as well as President Kang Dae-jung from Korea. So we have three presentations, and we will follow that up with the panel discussion. So allow me to introduce you to the panelists, the speakers. We have President Kang Dae-jung from National Institute for Lifelong Education. And then we have Ms. Kim Mi-soo, member of Goyang City Council, and Professor Yang Byung-chan from Gongju National University Education Department. Last but not least, Executive President Lee Sung-han from Hobi Institute. And online, we are joined by team leader Mr. Raul Valdez Cordera from UNESCO and Director Andreas Schleier from OECD. Thank you for joining us now. And let me explain how this is going to be done. I'm going to give 10 minutes to each panelist. And after all the panelists have spoken, we will have free discussion. So if there is anything that you would like to mention, I would like to ask the speakers to speak up after that, and the panelists as well. You can engage in free discussions, and also you can ask questions to each other. Of course, those of you who are joining us online can participate in the discussion through YouTube. You can leave comments and questions, and we'll pass that on. First of all, we'll listen to the panelists. I would like to give 10 minutes to each panelist, and we will follow the order. So member of the Goyang City Council, Kim Mi-soo, would you like to go first?
안녕하십니까, 김미수입니다.
Hello everyone, I am Kim Mi-soo. Today I'm here as a city council, but I actually prefer to be called as the activist. I love working at field, and I'd like to definitely utilize my experience and make it for the policy. Well, thank you very much for the presentation given by Team Leader Raul and Director Shulaiya. Already, as the moderator mentioned, we have prepared those things, and Goyang City lifelong education we have prepared for more than 3 years. At that time, the program that were conducted at a places where not a school were carried out, I did it too.
보셨겠죠? 평생학습의 범주가 어디인지도
So at that time, we were not sure what lifelong learning was. But in the 1970s, we had night schools for workers who had to work during the day. And then at night, they came to night schools. And after that, there was the cultural programs carried out by department stores. And since then, lifelong learning has been widely spread throughout our society. We now have more public space like libraries, welfare cities, community centers in the rural villages, and club meeting rooms in universities. So the concept of lifelong learning has spread throughout the country. And Goyang City has participated in this kind of lifelong learning environments. And most of the citizens said that Goyang City already offers a lot of learning programs, but it's not easy for ordinary citizens to find information about such learning opportunities. So they proposed building an archive of this kind of information once Goyang City managed to open a lifelong learning center. And I feel like one of the biggest challenge that I've had has been resolved today. The goal of lifelong learning is individual growth that can lead to the overall city's development, and securing sustainability of our lifelong learning practices is a very important goal. In evaluating lifelong learning, there has been some kind of problems, but Raul today has shared Canada, Singapore, complex learning indices, lifelong learning, what kind of impact it has on individuals' lives and cities' development. And that has to be found out before building the national initiative. And Goyang City has developed the learning indices. And this is a very meaningful progress because we'll be able to identify where the budget has to be allocated and where there is a big loophole and room for improvement. In preparing for Goyang City Forum, there was a great news. Goyang City has outsourced building a big data, and in the pilot platform, we learned that there will be lifelong learning platform on the platform. So every year, we'll be able to assess the performance of lifelong learning, and that information will be provided to various stakeholders. And the citizens wanted to have an archive, and their proposal has been accepted by the Goyang City government. And lifelong learning officers, and I would like to thank them for their hard work, and I would like to also make a proposal about utilization. There is a saying that pearl necklace on a pig, meaning that even though something is really good, if it's not relevant, it will be meaningless. So these lifelong learning opportunities should be made known and accessible to citizens as much as possible. Goyang City has a lot of similar programs carried out by different departments in the Goyang City government. Lifelong department has its own programs. Resident community department has its own program, and the Urban Regeneration department has a similar program. Voluntary organization department has similar programs. And as President Kang Dae-jung has said, there are people who actively participate in these activities, but there is a gap among citizens when it comes to engagement in lifelong learning opportunities. So we need to pay more attention in how to find a way to overcome such obstacles so that more people can join these programs, especially those who do not have enough time. Because of the COVID-19, they are now having better access to lifelong learning opportunities. And second is about performance management system. It's a framework, but it should not be entrenched. It should be flexible, reflecting the issues of the cities at the time. It should be diverse and flexible. COVID-19, media literacy, inclusiveness, these are the important agenda these days, and it should be reflected. We should not develop performance management solely for the purpose of performance management. It should be able to support our real work, and the data source proposed by Raul and the ways to create data is something we need to think about in depth. Performance management system is to promote lifelong learning. The performance management system should not receive too much energy, or we shouldn't waste the energy on performance management.
I just want to know if you have a laptop.
죄송한데 못 들었어요. 그냥 진행을 하도록 하겠습니다. 예. 마지막으로 오늘 이 포럼이 자료 것이 아니라
So I hope what we are saying today we can walk the talk in the future, and lifelong learning for Goyang citizens is a great opportunity for opening a second chapter in their lives for Goyang citizens. And there is a Korean saying that even if we have 3 bags of pearls, they are useless unless they're beaded together. So we have to allow and help Goyang citizens to find lifelong learning opportunities. Thank you very much for your attention.
의원님의
City Council Kim Mi-soo. Yes, Team Leader Raul Valdez's presentation was commented, especially performance management was mentioned, and I believe that it was a great news. Once again, they study building big data, and on top of that, performance management indicator of the lifelong education of Goyang City is added. Personally, 2016, I met her as an activist, and she's back as the city council for Goyang City, which means that lifelong education is actually being realized, and I do have a high expectation. Next, we'll go to Professor Yang Byung-chan.
네, 안녕하세요.
Nice to meet you all. I would like to make a comment to Director Schreider's presentation, but it said draft on the cover of his presentation, meaning that it can be changed. And his presentation has been enriched and greatly, and I was kind of flustered because I obviously read a different version of his presentation, and please reflect some level of frustration that I've had. Conservativeness of education and innovation in social environment, the gap between the two is quite big. It was accelerated and widened by COVID-19 pandemic. So Dr. Schreier said that last year, he has written an article in early last year, and in the article, Director Schreier has said that the educational bureaucracy and formality will be totally innovated by COVID-19. So COVID-19 will definitely force innovation on our society. And that has become true. We have changed our way of thinking greatly, and then we feel much more desperate to change. And as I was listening to Dr. Schreier's presentation, he has talked about the global situation and the Korean situation, and he has pointed out some of the things that we need to. I will also point out some of the things that Goyang City has to work on. So our future is the young people. And the young people, we expect them to be well prepared for the future society through education. But the youth these days have a very myopic expectations about job. Probably it is the fault of our parents' generation. Traditionally, we had fixed ideas or stereotypes about good jobs, and then we have passed on that stereotypes to our future generation. And that's why they have such myopic dreams. Their aspirations for jobs and the automation, jobs that have high risk of being automated, and the Korean society, there definitely is a mismatch. And as an alternative for overcoming such mismatch, we need much more support, including career guide support. we have tertiary education sector. This is not limited to universities or colleges, but any training or education that comes after mandatory education is something that we need to invest more. And I fully agree with Dr. Shiraya in that regard. But when it comes to how much we are prepared at the national level, it's something that we should think about more deeply, because still schools receive 99% of our financial resources that goes into education. And for the next 80 years, the citizens have to live on the remaining 1% of the financial budget for the education sector. So this is something that we should really think serious and hard at the national level. Korea has achieved remarkable economic growth, unprecedented in the world. And when it comes to educational opportunities, our educational opportunities has expanded greatly, and we have a lot of generational gap when it comes to education. Dr. Schreier has said that when it comes to basic PIAT skills, research for adults, there is a wide gap between different generations in Korea. And as President Kang Dae-jung has mentioned, digital divide in Korea is so big that we have no idea how to overcome this. So at the national level, we do not have a clear solution, to be honest with you. I think we should do more than just invest more money on adult learning. Education support for adult, we have various programs provided various institutions. And after COVID-19 pandemic, the schools are encouraged to adopt more technologies. And the Ministry of Education has been promoting edutech widely. They're saying the school should be more centered around technology, and adult learning or lifelong learning should focus more on training the adults to have more enriched life, like they can learn how to work on their hobbies. But the government has been too short-sighted and has been resorting to very short-term measures to the short-term problems. And Dr. Schreier has pointed out certain differences between countries. But what is the role of local governments? In Korea, the local governments have actively invested in education sectors, and Goyang City is definitely one of those cities. And how the local government should differentiate their roles and responsibilities from that of the central government is something that I would like to ask Dr. Schreier. Last but not least, at the citizens level, I believe that learning and education for citizens should receive more spotlight. Dr. Schreier said that skills should be the focus of attention by the central government, local governments, and corporations. But also at the citizens level, we should pay more attention to the skills. The citizens themselves should voluntarily create their learning opportunities and learning programs. How they want to learn in their place of residence, in their workplace, and how that will change their workplace and how that will change the region they live in. In the Goyang City Forum, we are talking about the urban regeneration, environmental issues, and they are all closely related to citizens' competency and citizens' skills. What kind of things the citizens learn, how they grow is closely related to the themes that such as environment and urban generation. Through learning, Goyang City believes that we'll be able to create a sustainable city. And Mayor Lee, in his keynote address, has delivered an important message about why we need to pay more attention to education. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Professor Yang. He has made comments and asked questions to Dr. Schreier, and he has shared a lot of food for thought, higher competency, better jobs, and how the country, the government, and the local government and the citizens can support that.
Last discussion, let me introduce Executive Lee Sung-han from HB Institute. Please begin. I'm very pleased to meet you all. I was just introduced by the moderator. My name is Sung-hwan Lee. I'm very pleased to join Goyang City Forum. The first slogan that I noticed is Sustainable City for Citizens' Happiness, which is quite impressive. And let's take a look at lifelong education from the perspective of sustainable city for citizens' happiness. Let's pose a question to our own selves. What should we do to walk toward the destination of achieving sustainable city for citizens' happiness? What are the most important factors? I believe it's very important to achieve subjective citizens. When I say subjective human being, it's very different. When I say citizens' subjectivity, what do I mean by that? It is self-evident that without the experience of living as a subject of self-directed life, it cannot lead to activity as an independent citizen in the city. So it's very important to constitute a city with each individual who has its own subjectivity. Well, President Kang Dae-jung lecture was quite interesting. And he talked about learning activity, learning programs, learning groups that lead the most powerful outcome of the living as a subject. Among the experience of living, what are the most important things? I believe there are three things. First, selection of learning activity. Second, selections of the learning program. Third, selections of the learning group. So these three elements are critical as we carry out our life as a human being. So in order to achieve this, comprehensive, integrated support for citizens' independent learning activity is required. Well, when we say we need to support citizen independent learning activity, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that we provide various programs like a shopping mall. It's not that, but rather we need to provide an evenly distributed programs, and two factors must be systematically considered and then should be laid down. First, there's a need for curation that fits the interest of citizens and their learning journey, which means recommending the right program. Second, we need a system that helps citizens to design and operate the learning that they want and need on their own is essential. For the past 2 years, the Goyang Lifelong Learning Festival has been held. However, there were a couple of issues like swine fever and COVID-19, and we stopped hosting it for 2 years. The Goyang City Learning Empathy Month campaign that started in 2018, which was the last Goyang Lifelong Learning Festival, will be an example of learning curation. At the time, Goyang City produced a study travel guidebook by organizing 404 programs run for a month in October across Goyang City, including a city-affiliated organization, auxiliary business, and cultural centers into 7 themes and curated online and offline learning, etc. It is absolutely necessary to organize and activate these cases more systematically. It is hoped that creative reorganizations of the content area and active attempts to improve the quality of on and offline curation will lead to new programs. A system that helps citizens run program by designing and proposing on their own is so-called quote-unquote fun campus school. And what time is the school? That's the name of the program. So fun camps GEMMY. If I literally translate Korean word, it could means not only fun but also like a jewel that is sparkling. And I sincerely hope the learning experiment in Goyang City can be sparkling like a jewel. And then once again, I sincerely hope that it can revitalize spontaneity, the initiative, and creativity of the citizens as a project with a double meaning of the entire Goyang City with a fun and gem-rich campus. I'll give another example. In case of the issue class, that's the name of the class, issue class, among the fun campus class, citizens can learn issues that are unreasonable, that needs improvement or needs to be improved or changed in the administrative and system, environment, and social conditions of the era in which we live through class learning meetings. It is centered on the process of actively raising questions and preparing solutions. Through this, citizen learners participate in the issue class, can experience the meaning of their own initiative, and naturally accumulate the capacity to grow as an independent citizen. Including Goyang City, democratic citizenship education is extremely important area within the boundary of lifelong learning education. The fact that the number of the citizen participation education program in the 6 areas of lifelong education significantly low is a great concern. In addition to the uniform lecture style, education is necessary to spread it to various types of learning activities such as seminars, workshops, learning clubs, and etc. For example, Goyang City Peace and Human Rights Minds and People's Meeting, abbreviation is 평사모. We plan and organize our own learning program on the regular basis every month, and we are running the groups and workshops. This is a great example. Revitalizations of education for democratic citizens in Goyang is not difficult if the current issues are comprehensively organized and rearranged to provide citizens with the various information and to make the conditions of accessibility easier. In Goyang, there are many educational and learning activities to increase the independence of citizens. In fact, various fields such as residence autonomy, libraries, urban regeneration, lifelong education, and culture and arts, it is quite significant that it is operated through support from the city department and private programs. If these are extended to lifelong education as a whole, in fact, it's not an exaggeration to say that there are very few departments that are not related to the city. Therefore, it is necessary task to establish a system of control tower functions that can oversee, arrange, and coordinate education and learning support projects scattered throughout the city. I'd like to propose a plan to install a future education officer or education policy planning officer in Goyang City under the direct supervisions of the mayor or deputy mayor for effective performance. Let me give you a conclusion. There's no need to blindly seek something new, but we can have a new perspective, a new viewpoint. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Chairman Lee Sung-han of Hobby Institute. He has offered comments to President Kang Dae-jung's presentation. And in order to support citizens learning, the role of the city government is very important. And he shared some of the learning experiments Goyang City is carrying out. And he also said that there is a small unit need for small unit support at Goyang City. And now we would like to engage in free discussion now on. So the presenters and panelists can all take part in the free discussion. And to make this more interactive, we will also review some questions that have been received through the YouTube channel to Dr. Raul's presentation, Team Leader Rao's presentation.
So you talk about indicator. So to you, Team Leader Rahul, we have a question. GNLC member country, they build big data. And if Goyang City build a big data, because we are planning to do so, is there any case, any example you can share among the GNLC city who built the big data and utilize that? And can we even link it for the city so that we can actually utilize that? In relations to that, Rahul, can you answer that? Is there a case?
Yes, sure. Thank you very much. I can answer that. I think that it's important just before answering that it will be very relevant to consider that there has been developing important elements to progress on monitoring lifelong learning, and we mentioned some index that were already in place in some countries. There is also, of course, there was the mention of PIAC, which is also able to monitor in some countries what is happening in adult learning and education. But it will be important also to mention this more national view of how countries in general are able to consider or integrate legal frameworks to monitor lifelong learning. And that is something that I would say, if there's a country that could make these questions and will move into the direction or really establishing legal frameworks for monitoring lifelong learning, I think is the Republic of Korea. Because there's already a clear progress in the constitution about lifelong, what you call education. It's already there. Then it's a very good machinery when it comes down to the different levels of government. So I think it's the way to think, and I think will be quite interesting to discuss on this. In relation to the big data, the concrete question, there is not so many, I would say, for the time being. However, there is a very good example in Glasgow, the United Kingdom, where the university is working on this direction of collecting big data, and the citizens in general are participating in this very excited process. I haven't seen any concrete outcomes yet, because this exercise started just last year, so haven't seen anything, but I think it will be important to follow up on that. And of course, I will be very, very much in favor of John Sut and Goyang to get in contact with Glasgow to see what are the expected outcomes to get on this. Thank you. Hope I was able to respond.
Thank you very much for sharing the details of the Glasgow case. Second question, on the YouTube, there are actually other questions that were presented by the panelists to the presenters, and Professor Yang Byung-chan has asked some questions to Director Schreiders about his presentation. So, Dr. Schreier, would you like to respond to the comments or questions? Professor Yang Byung-chan's questions, would you like to respond to them, Dr. Schreier?
Yes, if you can tell me the question from Dr. Chan.
Dr. Yang, would you like to ask the questions again? the government needs to invest more for education. Of course, the Korean government has not been able to do that sufficiently yet, but most of the lifelong opportunities are focused on liberal arts or for their hobbies, and the schools are increasingly moving towards technology education. So it's a paradox between the school education and lifelong learning. What do you think about this paradox? And what do you think is the difference in the role of local governments and central governments?
Thank you very much. In fact, first of all, I want to congratulate Goyang City. I think you're a great leader in Korea to actually make lifelong learning a reality for all. And let me start with the last part of your question. I do believe that local government has a very central role in lifelong learning, because lifelong learning is not about, a system-wide uniform approach. Lifelong learning is very much about the local ecosystem of learning. Lifelong learning is a whole of society enterprise, not just about, schools and universities. Lifelong learning takes place largely at the workplace. We used to learn to do the work in school, and nowadays learning has become the work. So it's the whole ecosystem that you need to mobilize. It's also very important, it's not just about learning, it's also about the capacity of the economy, of the local economy, to extract value from the skills of people, not to translate better skills into better jobs and better lives, and all of those happens at the local level. Now, this is where the matching between the skills of people and the utilization of people really takes place. That's why I think your approach in Goyang City to take local ownership of that is so important. But let me come to your first question, Dr. Tan, which is the more challenging part. I think the answer lies that we need to talk less about education and more about learning. The key to lifelong learning is to give people genuine ownership over what they learn and how they learn and where they learn and when they learn. Often in education and school education, universities, we make learners passive consumers. They accumulate a lot of content knowledge, and then we expect them to be prepared. And then we have this concept of a degree, you become a graduate, you're finished. And that's actually, I think, where the problem starts. We should not talk about concluding learning with a degree. The degree is always, the connection to the next step in learning. And that brings me to 2 points. First of all, when I think about the future of schooling, yes, of course, you need to learn academic content. But much more important is that we nourish the curiosity we are all born with. The great thing is that, we are born to learn. Now, if you have a 3-year or 5-year-old son or daughter, they'll always be curious. They're going to question everything you do. They're going to experiment with everything that comes into their way. They are curious as learners. And they're not only willing to learn, they're also willing to unlearn and relearn when the context changes. That's also very important in the world in which we live today. Some of the things that we learn suddenly lose their relevance. Whether it is, climate change or artificial intelligence, many things that we took for granted are no longer relevant in the world in which we live. The kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, have become easy to digitize, to automate. And therefore, I think that, curiosity, the social and emotional skills are really the foundation. If, school succeeds better to build great foundations for learning, people will continue to learn throughout their life. So I really think that is my main messages for the schooling sector. It's not just a question of money, of financial resources. It's equally a question of the approach that we take to learning and the support that we give to learners. But much more importantly, we are thinking too much about educational institutions when we talk about lifelong learning. I think in the future, we need to think harder about how do we recognize learning of people, Why should people invest in learning? You know, if I study more, if I learn new things, how will that translate into the work I do, how I get paid for it, how I get recognized for it in society? Today, our credentialing systems are not very good at this. You know, we recognize people by their degrees, by their formal qualifications. We do not know very much about the knowledge and skills people actually have. Companies need to become better at this. Governments can help companies to better recognize the actual skills that people have. And when you do that, lifelong learning starts to emerge. I know that Korea is a great leader in this, but if you go to a country like Sweden, in Sweden you have almost 50% of the adult populations engaging in learning. Because every step that you make as a learner is going to lead you somewhere, is going to lead to some better recognition, sometimes in better pay in your work. And people are not just learning, how to improve the performance in their current job. They often learn, for their next job, their next career, their next kind of aspiration. And I think those things are very, very important. It brings me back to the second part of your question. This is why local government is so crucial in this. You know that ecosystem. You know the demand for skills. You know the supply for skills. No? Skills matching is often a very local process. You have a specific employer in the region, a big company that needs certain talent, then people get attracted to study those kinds of things. You can moderate supply and demand. And that's, I think, why I think you're very well positioned to make lifelong learning a reality for all. Korea has developed an amazing school system, very well functioning initial education, but I think in the past it has not paid enough attention to ensuring that people will maintain their skills, upgrade their skills, build new skills, unlearn and relearn things that have become more relevant.
네, 네. 우리 안드레아스 슐라이어 교육장.
So Dr. Schreier has sufficiently answered these questions. Yes, we now have a full answer to these questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Schreier. And we have received several more questions. And I think this is a question that President Kang Dae-jung has to answer.
드리도록 하겠습니다.
So I'll integrate those questions. You talked about digital literacy, and that is why there are a lot of questions about digital literacy. Well, most of the digital literacy in Korea is about teaching Korean to the aged people. What about local autonomy, local government? What should we do? In the same vein, another question. At the National Institute for Lifelong Education, there are a lot of programs that give accreditation. Then, should the lifelong education be accredited by the local autonomy? If so, how can we make most of that? So, from the country-wise National Institute for Lifelong Education, what kind of work do you do? And the role of the local autonomy, what should the local autonomy should play to enhance the lifelong education? Great question. Thank you for asking those questions. Now, I mentioned digital literacy, and this is not a task to be handled by the central government or the country itself. During the Industrial Revolution, we had suffered a lot, and Director Andreas already talked about that. With the arrival of the fourth Industrial Revolution, the issue of the digital literacy once again poses a great suffering and hardship to all of us. We need to tackle these issues. And the central government, what it did was to achieve universal education during the first and second Industrial Revolution. However, during the fourth Industrial Revolution, what should the central government do? We need to make sure that digital platform must be well established at the primary elementary school students so that they can make most of it. But this cannot be done alone. I mean, not only the schools, but also the local autonomy, local administrations who are at the forefront, they need to play a certain role so that digital literacy can be provided. So one way for the local autonomy to play its own role is to provide support to the school. And second, a voluntary citizens' participation needs to be induced. And for example, Goyang City has operated YouTube channel since last year, and maybe using YouTube channel, Goyang City can play its own role. Now, accreditations of the lifelong education program, yes, it is very important task, especially the National Institute for Lifelong Education. We give credit to the students who undergo the lifelong education, and we do operate a certain system. In the future, accrediting or giving credit to the students who undergo lifelong education is very important. Especially there are a lot of lifelong education that are provided by the local autonomy, and we need to give credit, especially in relations with the vocational school. Of course, so far, a lot of vocational educations were given by a certain accredited agencies or organizations, but we live in the era of the online education, and via very short video clip, a certain type of educations are given. So the habit or the pattern of students learning via online have changed drastically. And we need to make sure that the short video clips need to be well curated and well provided so that students can learn a lot. And not only that, we need to make sure that the short video, when students learn, we need to give credit. This is another issue at the university. Let me make it in a more universal issues. Together with the Ministry of Education, the school, they need to discuss and consult. What if the students complete a short video clip? What should we do? Maybe the short video clips should be integrated, and then maybe we need to make sure that it is provided by a certain local government, and then only when you are subscribing to this credit program you can get accredited. But we should change the law, or we should improve the system so that like a KMOOC or online programs, if it is provided, if students take those classes, and then there must be a system so that we can give credit, and then it is regarded as if they have completed their education. Now, the law of the local autonomy, or from the local autonomy perspective, yes, maybe we need to adopt a mileage program. So each individual or each citizens, if they take part in different education, then this should be accumulated as if they are accumulating their mileage or points. And when a certain amount of the mileage points are accumulated, the local autonomy should propose a certain incentive so the students or the citizens will actively take part in lifelong education. In case of National Institute for Lifelong Education, we provide vouchers so that the underprivileged classes they can be encouraged to take part in. The voucher amounts to around 350 US dollar. And if we keep utilizing this program, mileage program, then underprivileged class family, they can actively take part in this online education program, and they accumulate mileage programs and then receive the voucher, and then their livelihood can also be supported, but also their education can be enhanced. So far, the participation ratio was not high, but we need to encourage them. Maybe from the citizens level, we need to give a certain incentive. So once again, we need to induce or introduce the mileage program so that the local autonomy can give credit to people who take part in this education, and also give credit when they accumulate certain mileage programs. So once again, we need to systemize this education program. We need to be more active in providing this education program.
Thank you very much, President Kang Dae-jung. He has talked about national level policies and the local government's roles and responsibilities. It was a very meaningful response. And I think it is always the case. We always run out of time for panel discussion. Whenever we are ready to fully engage, it's time to wrap up. So we only have 4 minutes left. So it's really regrettable that we won't be able to continue this much further. And Goyang City has organized this very meaningful forum, and we were here together. So everyone here, I would like to ask you to give us one word as a gift to Goyang City. So if you can give us one word as a gift to Goyang City, I think that would be a very great idea to conclude this forum. So first, I would like to ask Mr. Raul Valdez Cotera, and then Director Shilaya, and then President Kang Dae-jung. So in that order, you can give us one word to describe as a gift to learn lifelong learning of Goyang City. So just to give us one short word, because we only have 3 minutes remaining. So we can now afford to get a long sentence.
Thank you very much. I don't know if it's a word, but I think it will be very important for you to continue celebrating learning. I think you have been doing great in order to open discussions, to be continuously trying to improve and really learning how to learn, how to live together in this COVID situation, in this digital area. So please continue enjoying, celebrating learning. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 제가 단어
Thank you very much. I think it was too much to ask for a word. Actually, Mr. Shilaya, Dr. Shilaya.
My word is enabling. As Goyang City Council, don't think about yourself just as an educator. Think about yourself as an enabler, an activator of learning process in every part of life.
네, 좋은 단어. 네, 굉장히 상징적.
Yes, very symbolic words. Thank you. Well, what I want to say is lifelong education can be restructured. A city's administration can be restructured by the lifelong education.
So lifelong learning is a life, part of our life. Thank you. So we get to do this as well. We are just panelists, but anyway, I think it's a path. The path in front of Goyang City is going to be a path where the path of hope that we travel with the citizens of Goyang. I talked about 재미 campus, fun campus. So the word, it comes from sparkling gemstones, jewels. So Goyang City, would you like to go finding the jewel with me? So let us remember the words that were mentioned today. So time is up. So we need to wrap up. I would like to thank the 3 presenters and 3 panelists and everybody who has organized today's forum. Thank you very much. And now we would like to conclude the lifelong session. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Shin Min-sun, for successfully moderating this panel discussion. So Goyang City Forum 2021, we've had the opening ceremony and just concluded the first session, lifelong learning. We have shared a lot of insightful ideas today. I would like to thank everybody who has joined us online and offline. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we'll resume with the second session of Goyang City Forum 2021, and it will be Urban Regeneration session. We will see you at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.